As they balance on the brink of world recession, the owners and operators of leisure parks try to quell the churning feeling in the pits of their stomachs. In the race for your money, it's always a bumpy ride. Theme parks may seem to be frivolous places, but they are engaged in the serious business of making a profit. Those which aim for the top face a long, hard haul in the climb to prosperity, from roller coasters through simulated flight to virtual reality. The search is on for the ultimate ride. Technology is being used in ways which would have seemed fantastic only a few years ago, and unachievable to designers who first created the attractions we take for granted. Gone are the innocent pleasures of the past. Nowadays audiences are more sophisticated, and the frisson of fear they demand requires new levels of ingenuity.
We get to start with a blank sheet of paper. We get to start with a process that we call blue sky, and that stands for the sky's the limit.
You know, one of the feats to build any attraction is really the behind-the-scenes mechanical that it takes to not only protect our guests and our personnel, but we have to protect the building as well.
Magnum hits the top speed of 72 miles per hour at the base of the first drop. It's a little bit like going for a ride in your automobile with your head out the window. But then to get the full effect, you've got to drive off a cliff.
I'm not going to Mount Everest, and I frankly don't want to bungee jump either. But I would like to go to outer space. You know, I would like to see the future. And through simulation, we can actually deliver that.
Possibly before the end of 1992, we will see the first domestic virtual reality system available for sale in this country. And after that, I believe that's the end of civilization as we knew it.
Modern leisure parks are all based upon a theme seeded by one man and planted in an orange grove in California.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Cartoon king Walt Disney paced the first steps on the road to his unique vision of a corporate utopia. Not for the first time, a showman fought for finance to build a place for people to find happiness and knowledge, beauty and magic.
Saturday was always Daddy's Day with the 2 daughters. So we'd start out and try to go someplace with, you know, different things. And I take them to the merry-go-round, and I took them different places. And as I'd sit there while they rode the merry-go-round, did all these things, sit on a bench, you know, eating peanuts, I felt that there should be something built, some kind of an amusement enterprise built where that the parents and the children could have fun together. So that's how Disneyland started.
I've been buttering up to him all morning, hoping he'd say that about me.
Isn't this a riot today?
Oh, it certainly is.
And Ron, your first job is down here in the town square.
Right out here in front of the depot, yes, for the main street and the parade and so forth.
We have lots to do. Get busy.
Okay.
So long, Ron. Thanks for coming out.
Disneyland could happen only in a country where freedom is a heritage and the pursuit of happiness a basic human right. And Disneyland has happened only once during this century. Here is an entirely new concept in family entertainment.
Disney's dream fanned out from the hub of Sleeping Beauty's castle to turn a magic circle through Adventureland, Frontierland, Tomorrowland and Fantasyland, before wheeling right back to the heart of America on Main Street, USA.
This sensibility is refreshingly young and adolescent. And it is maintained so, in the sense that people constantly are looking for their identity, constantly asking who they are, constantly asking others for a reflection of their own image to which they desperately want to believe in.
the Mark Twain as she gets ready to start on her maiden voyage. The Mark Twain, a proud symbol of that romantic era when whole cities grew out of river ports.
Once you leave Disney World, as Bolia said, you just find this huge parking lot, and you have to go back into your car, and you have to go back into your life, which is so boring and so monotonous and so predictable.
Monotonous or not, Disney was family entertainment at its safest. Clean, affordable, and crime-free. The American dream in microcosm. Unlike modern hard ride parks, the early Disneyland rides were gentle perambulations based around a fantasy theme, many of which were built by a small California machine shop called Arrow Dynamics. 40 years later, however, Arrow have grown into world leaders in the design and construction of coasters and corkscrews, the nuts and bolts for millions of seekers of sheer white-knuckle terror.
Coasters are very unique. You know, they're not new, but they're unique. They're unique in the fact that basically you're taking a mass up to a certain height and dropping it. And, you know, as a kid, you might have dropped a rock out of a tree and watched it fall to the ground or fall into a stream of water. And we use those same principles of physics in the fact that when you take a weight up in the air, you create a certain amount of energy. We call it potential energy. And then when you let it go, that energy is converted into, that potential energy is converted into kinetic energy, which turns into velocity.
Yeah, why do people go on things like this anyway? You know, here we are, we're asking somebody to go up on a thing that's 20, 25 stories up in the air and come hurtling back down at 80 miles an hour, down a thing that's getting so steep that you almost stand on the front of the car going down the hill now, it's so steep.
Stress is often seen as something very negative and damaging. I mean, it's held responsible for everything from sort of impotence to fallen arches. It's a real bad word in our society, the big S word. But in fact, you need a level of stress in order to feel good about yourself, to feel at peak performance.
There are basically two different styles of roller coasters, wood coasters and steel coasters. Wood coasters are characterized by having flat steel track sitting on top of 5 or 7 laminations of wood, generally on a wood substructure, but not necessarily.
With roller coasters, bigger is better. The Mean Streak at Cedar Point is a timber coaster built in 1991 by Custom Coasters of Cincinnati. It is designed to intimidate. Rides like this already reach heights of 200 feet and cost up to $8 million. Such is the popularity of these timber monsters that Cedar Point will still recoup the costs and make a profit.
Steel coasters, on the other hand, generally consist of tubular steel track, generally but not always on a steel substructure. Magnum hits the top speed of 72 miles per hour at the base of the first drop. It's a little bit like going for a ride in your automobile with your head out the window. But then to get the full effect, you've got to drive off a cliff.
The Magnum is a one-of-a-kind ride, there's no question. It has held the first place now for several years. Cedar Point, when they came to us originally, said basically we want the tallest, fastest coaster in the world. We want it to also look that way. What we'll do is we'll just take the structure and we'll make it a little wider, but we'll go straight up with it, all the way up. And there will be no side supports at all on the structure. So when you look at it, you just say, oh my gosh, look at this thing. You know, will it even stand up looking at it? And you have that question.
When I approach a new roller coaster, it's always with a sense of both anticipation and a little trepidation. Thinking to myself, okay, this better show me something I haven't seen before. And it does.
There's a feeling of great tension going up the lift hill. It feels like you'll never be able to release this tension. It's so frightening that you think you're going to die.
Looking down, looking all around me, looking at nothing surrounding the car except air. And at that point, it clicks in that I'm relying on faith.
When you get to the top, there's this fabulous, delicious moment where you hang for just 1 second on the lip of reality. That I can do anything. I mean, that my body is capable of going through this abuse and surviving it. For people who can't dance, this is the closest to dancing that you can get. It's the closest to human soaring. And it's the closest thing I've actually had to experiencing poetry, what it feels to be like in a poem. It's like being able to spread your wings and fly.
Although the technology used is the same as in other amusement parks, it's the themes and the sense of scale which lift Disney's attractions head and shoulders above the rest.
Behind us you see Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, and Big Thunder Mountain is again, it's the fourth mountain that we've created, but it's amazing how many people come here and look at the mountain with its carved rock and its sculpted features and wonder where in the heck we found all this rock, and they didn't realize this kind of stone existed in this part of France. The design technology, or should I say the design of Big Thunder Mountain, really comes from the Monument Valley in Arizona and some of the southwest parts of the United States. The concrete and steel structure of Big Thunder also includes the ride system inside it, which is a very high-tech control system that controls to the ultimate safety, the guests in the park. They take off from the Big Thunder load area and then dive down under the river and go up through the ride and then return back down through the river. And it's an exciting element of the show that we don't have in our other parks.
Euro Disney rose from French soil in just 4 years, but it took more than the wave of a wand to make it happen. Every stone, steel girder and block of concrete has been laid according to the strictest guidelines based upon decades of experience. By the time Mickey's Magic Land is finished, the rides, lakes and parades will cover 2,000 hectares, turning a plot 1/5 the size of Paris into a giant slice of Americana right here in little old France.
You can't get a ride in society for free. You have to pay to belong in the society. And in urban societies, we pay because we are born into structures. We're born into classes, we're born into families, we're born into tradition, we're born into manners, we're born into a certain speech. We struggle against all that all our life. We really are frustrated by it.
If you try to delve into the philosophy and the psychology behind the Disney product, a big part of the environment that we try to create is to allow one to leave their troubles at the gate, the main gate, and come in and to re-enter those storybook environments of their youth with the classic characters that we have in the park, from Mickey Mouse to Cinderella to Snow White, Seven Dwarfs to Alice in Wonderland. All the very, very well-known characters that we have built the concepts of our park around generally have, it's like reintroducing to the youngest child and the oldest adult stories that they've been around and heard all their life.
Visiting somewhere like Disney is really stepping back into childhood. It's created a world which is very womb-like. You know nothing bad can happen to you. You know it's almost like holding Granny's hand. And the very interesting thing about Disney is that there are things called biological releases. For instance, the shape of a baby with its over-large head and large eyes is very much the same as the shape of a kitten or a puppy or a lion cub. And these are called biological releases, and actually the shape of the young animal triggers in us feelings of affection and caretaking and all these other rather positive emotions. All Disney heroes have these biological releases: large heads, large eyes, disproportionately shaped limbs. And so I think this triggers these rather infantile, you know, in a fairly positive sense, these infantile feelings. But at the same time, although I greatly admire the Disney operations, I think it's wonderfully well done. I think it's unsurpassed in terms of the mood it creates. There is something, I think, slightly sinister about Disney.
Well, America is basically producing images. And this culture of the image is the one that circulates most easily over the world. It's the most seductive, the most glamorous. It's the only industry that America can really sustain at this point.
The secret of the Disney vision is this belief in a universally shared fantasy life. It's a simple concept which has never stopped smiling, never grown up, and so far never failed to make money. Like Rumpelstiltskin, Euro Disney's Imagineers hope to take the straw of dreams and weave it into gold.
The term Imagineer is a combination of the concept of a designer and an engineer together being an Imagineer. And one of the greatest challenges for an Imagineer, and also one of the greatest fears in the process of creativity, is what we get to do. We get to start with a blank sheet of paper. We get to start with a process that we call blue sky. And that stands for the sky's the limit. So when we start to develop a concept for a project, we automatically go back to what's worked for us in the past.
I didn't need a shove, fell in love with your pretty baby face, rosy cheeks and turn up nose.
Part of the perspective of Main Street and the architectural design is, of course, perspective that, so when you come in from the main gate through the ticketing complex and you look up Main Street at the castle, everything is sort of tiered in its architectural development, from the buildings being 7/8 floor scale and 5/8 second floor scale. That first perspective gives an exaggerated feeling of distance for the castle. And the castle in of itself was a very unique design challenge for us in the park, because wherever you go in Europe, you don't have to go too far in any direction to find beautiful chateaux, beautiful castles. So we went back to the magic storybook kind of castle from Cinderella, and the vivid salmon and pink tones of the castle with the gold leafing and the blue tile roofs to create something that is truly out of a storybook setting.
Bonjour, bienvenue au Pirate. Bonjour. Bonjour, bienvenue au Pirate.
Storybook fantasy was at the heart of the last attraction personally supervised by Walt Disney before his death in 1966. This year sees the European debut for Pirates of the Caribbean.
We celebrated the 25th anniversary of this attraction, and I was amazed to find out at that time that 290 million people had gone through that attraction. And that, you know, to have worked on it, that makes you feel very good. And it's still the #1 attraction at Disneyland.
The original development team for Disneyland was recruited from those who had already contributed towards the success of the film empire. Mark Davis was one of the so-called 9 old men of animation, some of whom went on to work on the park. Originally, he specialized on classic female characters, including Tinkerbell, Sleeping Beauty, and Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians.
Walt Disney came into my office one day and he said, something, you know, Mark, he said, something I'm interested in. I said, I'd like to do an attraction on pirates. He says, maybe Pirates of the Caribbean. And he described this as a real swashbuckling kind of idea thing. And so this was the very, very beginning. So I thought this was great. So I got books from the library on pirates and everything else. And I remember when I was a kid seeing a Lon Chaney film, and he had something in his eye that it was something I've never forgotten. And I have one part that has a white eye. So little things like this all the way through.
To the sound of sea shanties and crashing waves, visitors are floated through a series of tableaux depicting skullduggery and jolly robbery, all brought to life by Disney's innovative audio animatronics.
The inscription on here came because I had a hook on the captain's left hand, and Walt said, no, why don't you get rid of that and put his hand on the well, and we don't have to animate so much. So economically, he lost his hook. And these are some close-ups of the magistrate. And here again is a close-up of the man pulling him up. His wife is up here in a window, and she's telling, do not tell him, Carlos, no, no, no.
America is just a technological society, a society where everything had to be produced out of nothing. And this is basically what's happening to the rest of the world, and especially to Europe. All the tradition is slowly eroding, all the creed and religions and all the sense of reality that people have. Even the French with their rituals of food is disappearing. They're getting to hamburgers, etc., etc. We are already Americans, but we don't know it. Americans know it. They suffer from it. But at the same time, they want to have the fun.
All good movies go to theme park heaven. And at Universal Studios, the designers have a license to chill as visitors tread in the footprints of their heroes from the flight deck of the Starship Enterprise into, for California, an all-too-realistic earthquake.
First thing that happens is that you pull into the subway station on a tram, and immediately upon that, you get this, starts shaking, this huge shaking movement. Large ceiling slab, 40 feet long, with the truck comes careening down and crashes down. Then, a subway train coming from the opposing tunnel comes running in, screeches in. Just when you think everything's all over, there's this huge 60,000-gallon flood that comes down right at you, knocking over, careening over the steps and stairwells, knocking down things, turnstiles and trash cans and everything, and comes right over at you and drops right in front of you. Some of it gets on you, but that's okay. That's what it's all about.
This earthquake hits Burbank 200 times a day.
When we originally started designing the show, we sort of forgot the fact that not only did it have to run within 2.5 minutes, but it had to be reset and a new tram had to be pulling in there for the next 2.5 minutes. So as we got into it, we realized that we would have to start moving these big pieces of machinery. And not only drop them very quickly, but they almost had to lift up at the same time. One of the other problems with resetting an attraction is that a show will play out for 1.5 minutes. And this will happen, that will happen, all these different things will happen. When you reset it, you're essentially asking all of it to happen at once.
At the back of your mind, you have the notion of control, that these things don't go wrong, that there is nothing to be really afraid of. So it kind of gives you a notion of control, and that notion of control is sufficient to turn the stress of the situation, the arousal, the beating heart, the dry mouth, the all the other physiological symptoms of high arousal into a pleasant sensation.
This human hunger for high arousal has been exploited by showmen for generations. In 1912, one of the hits of Coney Island's Dreamland was an attraction depicting the burning of Chicago. Twice daily, by popular demand, New Yorkers loved it. An up-to-the-minute equivalent of the burning of Chicago is now open at Universal Studios, but these days the sense of danger is even more acute, as audiences are apparently trapped by the inferno in this reconstruction of the dramatic climax to the movie Backdraft.
Well, I think what we've done with Backdraft is we've taken the technologies that we've been working on for 25 years here at Universal Studios, and we've enlarged their scope, and we've put them in combinations that we'd never quite done before. Fire effects is something we've used before, but we've never taken it to this degree.
As construction neared completion, every valve and gas jet was checked exhaustively.
As you walk in, the lights are down low, you see a little smoke. There's obviously been a fire started in there. They're actually out on catwalks, sort of suspended in the middle of this warehouse. In that moment, the doors explode open, and you get a backdraft, which sends a fireball just racing across towards the audience. And then that one fireball starts a chain of events that will, in essence, burn the warehouse down right before your eyes. Our audience is actually protected by a curtain of air, which deflects much of the heat. And one of the feats to build any attraction is really the behind-the-scenes mechanical that it takes to not only protect our guests and our personnel, but we have to protect the building as well. We're burning heat that will probably reach, over the course of a 2-minute period, almost 1 million BTU. At the same time we're doing that, we're exhausting the hot air at a rate of about 200,000 cubic feet per minute. The show is run by computers. We have operators who monitor the show. They have large status panels which give them screens that show them everything that's happening. In order to fire any effect, the logic of the computer will say, this has to be true, this has to be not true, and it has to be within this window of the show.
This fun that people need was really exemplified in the riot. I know the riots were very deadly, etc., but listening round the clock to CNN, I never heard anyone emphasize the kind of joyous quality, the quality of the looting, of the riot, etc. It's as if suddenly the police have been withdrawn from South LA. People had a ball. People really turned into an amusement park. People really organized their leisure. They turned it into a real theme park. And the theme there is a very well-known theme. It's called Civil War.